Recently, someone asked me if I had any advice for new grievers, someone who is just starting out their grief journey. What would be the one thing that I would say to those people to help them out in those first days? I thought that was an awesome question, so that is what I am going to tackle here today. Although because it's me and I have a horrible time narrowing things down and making decisions, I'm going to be giving you my 3 top pieces of advice for people who have just started the grieving process. Stay tuned. Hey there, if we haven't met, my name is Brooke from Grieving Mommy, and on my channel I share my journey through loss and grief after losing my 10-year-old daughter Libby in a car accident. I also help other people that are going through the grieving process. So if I were to say anything to someone who has just started their grief journey, the first one would be this: stay away from grief groups on the internet in the first few months. Okay, I know, haters, please don't come at me with your knives and pitchforks. I know that there is definitely a place for grief groups. In fact, it's kind of ironic that this is my first piece of advice because I myself run a grief group. They are wonderful things. However, you need to find the right one, you need to find the right community, and those few early months, you're really not in a position to do that. I want you to avoid groups, especially on Facebook, a lot of Facebook groups. I can just tell you from my own personal experience. After my daughter died in a car accident at 10 years old, I just went searching for anyone who had some sort of idea of what I was feeling. I wanted some sense of camaraderie with anyone. And I joined a lot of Facebook groups about grief and child loss. And what ended up happening was there were a lot of people on there that were just super, super negative.
You're too negative.
And I have nothing against negativity in grief. Grief sucks. We all know that, right? But my problem was that I was running into right away people who were 15, 20, even 30 years out from their loss that were joining these groups and commenting every day about how they were still crying daily and they were depressed and couldn't get out of bed and were having trouble functioning at that far out. And I understand that some people go through that. Again, put away the knives and pitchforks. But in your earliest days of grief, at least for me, it was like that sucked all of the hope just right out of me. It just confirmed what I was feeling inside, because I was feeling like I was never going to be happy again. My life was ruined. It was over. I might as well die. And those groups just reinforced those feelings, because all I could think was, oh my God, if I'm 30 years out and I'm still in these groups and I'm still crying every day, what is the point?
Nobody wants to hear about that.
And it's not all like that. It doesn't have to be like that. When you are a couple months down the road, grief groups are so important for finding community, for finding other people who understand what you are going through, for being able to vent, just making friends that understand your feelings.
You get me. And you get me.
But in those early days, you have to be so careful with who you surround yourself with. And I'd hate for you to get stuck in those groups that suck away your hope like they did mine. The next thing that I would say to new grievers is this: learn as much as you possibly can about grief. I know that not everyone is as nerdy pants as I am. I understand that. I don't expect you to go off and buy, a million books on Amazon about grief. Not that I did that or anything. Totally did that. But anyway, I know not everyone is like that. But there are so many blogs and articles and videos and books that are broken down into small, digestible chunks that will help you learn about the grieving process. For me, that was invaluable. Knowing what to expect, that not everyone is the same and has the same journey, knowing that everything that I was feeling was normal, and probably most importantly, learning when what I was feeling was not normal and that I needed some extra help. I'm planning on doing a longer post in the future with my favorite resources for dealing with grief, but I thought that I would give you a quick version of that, of the books that if I had to pick were the most important things for me when I was starting out my grief journey that I found the most helpful. The first book on my list that I would buy for a newly grieving person is called The Irreverent Grief Guide, and it is by Elizabeth Kupferman. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And it is just amazing. It helped me survive those first few months. If you don't like swearing, it might not be for you because she swears like a sailor, but so do I. So it was like kindred spirits reading the book. But basically that takes you in tiny little chunks first through those very first months of grief. And she does it in such a raw, honest, funny way that sometimes I couldn't help but laugh, like, yeah, that's really how I feel right now. and it freaking sucks. So that one would be the first one I would recommend. The second book that I would recommend is more specifically for grieving parents, and that is Pat Chevelin's How Do I Survive? Now that book, like I said, is specifically about child loss, but I found it probably the most hopeful thing that I read right after my daughter died. It was a pretty easy read, a quick read, but again, it offered so much hope and actual steps, I thought, for starting that healing process in my grief. So I highly recommend that one. The third book on my list is called Your Grief, Your Way, and that is by Shelby Forsythia. Shelby Forsythia is kind of my grief girl crush. She is a grief guide that is just phenomenal. She really lets you know, she makes you feel kind of like she's your best friend and wants you to know that your grief is totally normal and the things that you're experiencing are normal. Shelby also has 2 podcasts, and the one that I really enjoyed was called Grief Seeds. First of all, her voice, it's like butter, like butter. It just is the most soothing. Sometimes I feel like I didn't even hear what she was saying. I was just listening to her talk because it was like having an angel read to you. It was just so calming.
So soothing.
And everything she said was so soothing that she made me feel like I was going to be okay and like someone understood. Her book is great. Again, Your Grief, Your Way. You can kind of tell by the title. She's just really big on allowing people to grieve in the way that they need and kind of normalizing the things that happen during grief. So I found that one very helpful. The next book on the list is a little bit different than the others. It is called Option B, and that is by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. And that one Sheryl Sandberg wrote after her husband passed away. And it's, I would say, less about grief and more about resilience, more about just moving forward and what to do when the life that you wanted doesn't work out. And I appreciated the fact that, at least for myself, after my daughter died, the future that I had planned totally changed and it was freaking me out. And that book made me feel a little bit better. It's kind of about the pivot in life when things don't happen the way that you wanted. So along with these books, I also have 2 TED Talks that I highly, highly recommend. You can search for them on YouTube. The first one is by Lucy Hone, and it is all about resilience. Let me get the name here so I can give it to you exactly. It is called 3 Secrets of Resilient People, and it is a TED Talk. Again, you can search for that on YouTube, and I'll also have links on my website, grievingmommy.com, and I'll try to put them down in the show notes as well. So Lucy, I really connected with because we shared similar experiences in that her 12-year-old daughter died in a car accident and my 10-year-old daughter died in a car accident. So I kind of immediately had that connection with her. But her whole TED Talk was so motivating because it was all about resilience and how tragedy can turn into forward momentum and movement. And that really, like, unlike the grief groups on Facebook, that TED Talk really made me look forward with more positivity and more hope. And it doesn't lessen or, detract or dampen the fact that what you're going through is awful. But again, it doesn't have to be the end of your life, is her point. You can still make your life meaningful despite your losses. The second video that I'm going to recommend is also a TED Talk, and that is by Nora McInerney. This one has like a bazillion views on YouTube, so you may have seen it already. But that one is called "We Don't Move On from Grief, We Move Forward with It." And Nora did this TED Talk after she had some really terrible experiences. She lost her dad and had a miscarriage and lost her husband all within a short span of time. So I could also relate to that because I also have some compound grief where lots of people in my family and lots of people that I loved that were really close to me died in a short amount of time. And I just love her humor and her spirit. And again, I kind of felt that like kindred souls, that connection with her. She has turned into my writer crush. I love her writing. She's written other books as well. But it all kind of started for me with that TED Talk, where again, you can tell from the title, it's not about forgetting your grief. It's not about moving on. It is moving forward and learning how to live with your new circumstances. And I found that really helpful. Like I said, I am planning on doing more book reviews and things like that. If that's something that you would be interested in, if you could put down in the comments, "I'm in," or something like that. If you would enjoy me reviewing more grief resources for you, I would be happy to do that. I have a very stacked library full of grief books that I could review for you. Okay, and last but not least, my last tip for anyone who has just started the grieving process is rest. Rest, rest, rest.
You need a rest.
Rest like your life depends on it. Rest like it is your freaking job. Because it is right now. Your brain and your body in those first early days of grief, they are going through the worst trauma and the most work that any brain and body could have to do. And your body is going to crave that rest. Even if you're having trouble sleeping at night, just take those moments throughout the day when you can, where you can curl up on your sofa under a fuzzy blanket and maybe just watch some Netflix and zone out. If you could maybe take a nap in the afternoon. I was never a napping person ever. Like, I can't remember ever taking naps. And after my daughter died, it was like I didn't have a choice. My body didn't give me a choice. I was so tired that I would just sit down on the sofa and I would fall asleep sitting up half the time. It was my body and brain's way of telling me that I needed to slow down and I needed time to recuperate. I needed to give myself some grace and let my body catch up with what was going on. So I know that sounds so simple just to say rest, but honestly, just schedule time if you have to. Carve out time in your day. If you don't want to be alone, have someone sit with you and hold your hand, whatever you need, so that you can just stop moving and just be with yourself and let your body kind of calm down and regenerate itself to get you through what you're going through. Honestly, some of the best advice that I can give you. All right, so that is it. Those are my 3 top pieces of advice that I would give to anyone who has just started grieving. Is there anything I missed or anything that you would add to the list? Do you agree, disagree? I would love to hear in the comments below what you think great advice to someone who's just starting this journey would be. As always, feel free to check out my website, grievingmommy.com. I'm going to leave another video with some more grieving tips up here for you to watch. And I would love for you, if you found this helpful, to hit the like button or subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Love and hugs.